This episode of Nos Audietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Audietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to...
This is Nos Audietis.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Lodero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is good.
Seattle Sounders, the greatest MLS team in history.
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Paul can't say it's cheating.
You want to win? Let's see how the Sunday, bro.
Welcome to another edition of Nos Audietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and our Substack subscribers. This is episode 409, and we're recording on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. I'm your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today in place of Aaron Campo is our old friend, Mark Kastner, and of course, our producer, Lickett. How's it going, Mark?
Pretty good. I wish the Sounders would score some more goals, but other than that, I can't complain about a whole lot.
Yeah, so we come to you after the Sounders played to yet another 0-0 scoreless tie. I think that's their fourth scoreless tie of the season. It is their third straight home game without a goal, and they have now gone scoreless in 4 of their last 5 overall, and they are on pace to have their lowest scoring season in any 34-game season yet. The positive is that they are also on pace to have their fewest goals allowed. They've already registered 10 shutouts this season, and that's allowed them to stay pretty competitive in the West. They are still somehow third, and only I think 3 points out of first place. But this is becoming increasingly brutal to watch, Mark. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth in my head about like whether or not this was like actually brutal. Are we kind of being spoiled or whatever? Because, you know, I obviously now live in Minnesota and I'm surrounded by a bunch of Loons fans. And, you know, they're not a particularly good soccer team at this point, or at least in this iteration. And I just like was kind of talking to a friend who is a Loons fan, and I was just kind of like explaining it. And he's like, "Oh, I thought you guys were a lot better."
That is like, it's funny because it feels like whenever we talk to, like, you know, we do the opposition research kind of episode every week, and every week they come in sort of like, "Oh, we're going to be happy to get a point out of this,"
and it's like, no, actually, like we're not that good at all right now, like. Or in the coming on 3 months, almost 4 months at this point. And it's just sort of like, what is this team? What are they actually like good at other than like not allowing the other team to score a whole bunch? But yeah, it is like pretty grim. It's also pretty grim because like the games are happening later for me.
Yeah, right. So you're like fighting off.
Yeah, it's like the most boring second half I've ever seen is happening almost at 11:30 p.m. and I'm just like, what choices have I made with my life that led me to this point?
Well, and what's an interesting thing is that the last few games seem to have fallen into a very similar pattern where they start reasonably brightly, they create a few chances, they're connecting, they're moving, they're doing all this stuff, and you're like, okay, well, this is definitely the game where they bust out of their scoring streak, and then they get to halftime, and and then maybe they start the second half well, but then as the game moves on, they just sort of like lose whatever it was. I don't know exactly I don't have in front of me the shot stats, but it felt like right around the 60th minute, both this game and LAFC, which we didn't talk about. We didn't record an episode talking about LAFC, so if we want to talk about that too, we can. But they just seem to lose steam, and they don't. All of a sudden, the attack sort of dries up. Nico Ladero started both games on the right, and I thought there were parts of both games where he looked like, okay, this works. This kind of works. Like, it's maybe not ideal, but you can see the pieces, but then it just sort of falls apart. And I don't know why that is. I don't think it's as simple as, oh, well, they're getting tired. But I don't know, maybe it is.
Yeah, there's this like really interesting situation that's happened in like the last two games. And, I'm not necessarily one to be like, oh, 2 games is a trend, especially when one of them is against an objectively really, really good team in LAFC, even though, they had their absences and whatnot. But it's like almost down to the like the 64th minute of each match. It's like the Sounders have just been like, okay, we're all done. And
we've done what we can.
That's it. And so it's not only has the attack dried up, but then the opposition gains some sort of like power up or something, and they get to take all their shots and stuff.
Right.
And like you kind of end up looking at like game flow charts or whatever, and you go, oh, the Sounders were actually lucky to get out of that game at that point.
And this was in the Orlando game was a great example of that, where right around the 64th minute, all of a sudden, Orlando started putting together chances, and they had 2 just absolutely massive chances. I think the Sounders were probably quite lucky not to give up a goal. There was the one where Facundo Torres hit a cross, or maybe you could call it a shot, that Fry did actually a pretty good job of parrying away, but then he hits it right into the feet of Pereira, who has a wide open shot from 8 yards out, and somehow goes wide with it. And then there was another one that was like that. They had another chance that was just barely missed. But it was, I think, weirdly, the Sounders had to feel pretty good about getting out of that game only, with a shutout and with a point, even though, the first 30 minutes, especially, I thought they looked spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't be as positive about that first 30 minutes against Orlando as you are, but I don't necessarily hold that against you or anything. They looked functional. They looked okay. They looked like they had the right ideas. But they have one idea right now. They don't have sort of like a nuanced option when things don't end up working out, like against LAFC and Orlando, where you can have your kind of go-to plan where, the Sounders at this point, with kind of the personnel that they have, they want to transition the ball up the field on the left side with Leo Chu. They have Ladero kind of playing this free role. They want to kind of overload the left side, either to kind of have this cutback cross come into the box and that end up in a shot, or to kind of switch it around really quickly to the right side and then, try to create something that way. But it's just this like really sort of like not clunky, but like a gear turning really slowly. And that's just like, that can work, at this level, but it obviously hasn't. I mean, it looked okay. I think between the 2 games, you think like, how did they not score a goal? Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I'm not like super encouraged by the lack of like another thing that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand it. I guess what I'm thinking of is there was 3 plays in particular that really stood out to me as sort of showing that this team has something that's just, there's a little bit of luck going on here, or bad luck going on here. One of them was like right in the first minute where they had a 7-pass sequence where they moved the ball from their penalty area into the opposition penalty area with a bunch of quick passes, a bunch of nice interchanges, and the final ball was Albert Rusnak putting Hebert just perfectly in stride into the box, and just this well-weighted ball. And I don't blame. I mean, Hebert took a good ran onto it. He hit a good shot, and Pedro Gaese makes a quality save. It happens, right? You do, no frustration there, but you could just see okay, this is flowing. And then almost immediately they created another chance on the other side of the field where Nuhu plays in Chu with this really slick line breaking pass that puts Chu into the box. He hits across that Hebert back heels across the box. Yamar absolutely concretes his first touch, but it goes right to Nico Ladero, who hits this right-footed shot that looks like it's bending in, only it hits the crossbar and it doesn't, obviously. And then there was this other really nice little interchange between Hebert and Rusnak at the top of the box that wasn't as close to being a goal, but just was this really clever little interchange. And I'm seeing all this stuff thinking okay, these are clearly players who understand different attacking styles. They understand where they want to be, and yet it doesn't come off. And then like I said, it just every week it seems to fall apart around the 60th, 65th minute, something like that. Even you go back to the Charlotte game where they scored 3 goals, 3 well taken goals, and I want to say that Rui Diaz's second goal, the third goal of the game, came in the 70th minute, somewhere around there. And that was the Sounders' second shot of the second half. And they did not take another one after that. And it's just this pattern of I don't know, capitulation. Is that I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but it feels that way. And I guess to some degree you can chalk it up to they just don't have, their depth is just at its breaking point. They just don't have, and in fairness, you look at the bench and it's who are they going to bring off the bench to really change this game? And okay, Freddie Montero, maybe Hebert has come off the bench a few times, but neither one of those guys strike me as sort of instant offense type of players. And more than that, they don't have anyone that can set these guys up that is coming off the bench. And so I suppose on some level that's a roster building flaw, but you can only build a team, like we've talked about so many times, you can only build a team that's so deep in MLS. Once you get beyond your first 15, 16 players, you are sort of having to rely on young guys doing a bit, doing a little extra. And I think they've done a really good job of developing central players and defensive players. They have not really done a great job of developing players with offensive ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's a broader conversation to have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I don't know if this would be considered a controversial take or anything like that, but when you have players of the quality of Joss Atencio just being a complete pretty much basically a castaway for the last month, he maybe gets 20 minutes in the second half or something like that. It just communicates to me that there's just not there wasn't enough thought kind of put into maybe predicting or kind of forecasting the situations that they found themselves in this season. And that is maybe a little bit harsh on my part, but I think as a coaching staff or as sort of an entire sort of roster build group, you could see Nations League and the Gold Cup and that stuff on the horizon, and just to kind of the entire offense, the entire kind of creative fulcrum of this team isn't actually Nicolas Lodero or Albert Rusnak. It's Christian Roldan. The numbers bear repeating. They have scored 17 goals in the 700 minutes he plays, and in almost the 1,200 minutes they've played at this point, they've only scored 7.
Yeah, that's a hard one to ignore.
Yeah, and it's okay, yeah, you can't see that a concussion is going to get him out for 2 months. But you can ask the question, like, what happens if Christian Roldan doesn't play?
Who's our backup right mid? Which was, in fairness, a question that I think they knew needed answering all along, and they've never really done anything to answer it.
Yeah, but then there's just like there's been like no structural change to get like their 11 or let's say 10 of their best 15 players on the field at any given point. Like I I just don't understand how, like, okay, you look at the situation, maybe you try a formation change, which they've kind of done a little bit. They're playing they're effectively playing a different formation now than they do when Jordan Morris plays and stuff like that. But like, you can't just like look at the quality of play. Like, there are good players on the bench that they just can't use right now. And it's like, okay, how come we can't get those guys to do, like, why can't Obed Vargas play as like a Christian Roldan light? And so Josh Atencio can play, and then maybe you get some more sustained possession in attacking areas. Because that's, I think, the biggest problem right now is they do get these like really good looks, but they're 15 minutes apart from each other.
Yeah, so, I mean, that would be an interesting look that they haven't tried is trying Obed as a right mid with Albert in the middle and Atencio at defensive midfield. And I suppose that's maybe a good place to jump into this part of the conversation where I think there has to be a big question about what do the Sounders do about Nico Lodeiro. And it's the thing that makes it frustrating is that you see the effort. I think in some ways you even see the semblance of, you see the qualities that make him attractive. Like, he's still reasonably good on the ball. He covers a lot of ground. He sees passes, I think. It's just that he's not, I think it's now 10 games since his last primary assist. That's a glaring problem, especially when that's supposed to be your central playmaker. They've moved him out to the right, and I think, and like, he was goal dangerous. I think to his credit, against Orlando, he looked dangerous. He had, 2 really good looks at goal. I think he generally was a positive influence on the game, but he's just not doing enough, especially if he's going to be he's going to be your primary playmaker. And more than that, there's not a lot of reason to keep playing him when it doesn't feel like there's a future to hit. Like, at this point, it's hard to imagine bringing him back.
Yeah. And it's like, he creates this problem where, sorry if I clear my throat a couple times, it's really smoky here. So he creates this problem where, he's the highest paid player on the team or the second highest paid player. I know it's like a few $100,000.
Yeah, it's one way or the other. One of the 2 highest paid players.
And, the best player in club history, the captain of the team, there's all this stuff. But if we're to kind of like believe what he said, where the Sounders just haven't approached him for any contract talks,
right? And
his contract expires in less than 6 months at this point.
Yep.
It's like, what's the deal here? Like, and on top of that, the team is playing very bad,
right?
Or by their own standards, bad. And it's like, okay, he isn't forcing kind of the contract on the table with the play. He is taking up a position on the field that, like, he's not doing enough at the number 10 offensively to be playing there. They're just trying all this different stuff just to keep him on the field. And it's like, why for at this point?
Yeah. Just to close the loop a little bit on your Atencio point, which I do think informs this discussion, is, he hasn't started an MLS game since May 31st. He started twice for Tacoma in that time. He's only made 2 appearances for the first team. Both of them were pretty short sub appearances late in game where they were sort of like either trying to close out a win in the case of Charlotte, or they were just trying to get some fresh legs on the field against LAFC. And it's not like he's been amazing in any of these games, but I do think that he clearly provides something. And I would like. I mean, I'm at this point where I just want to see some different looks, and if it mean and it's not about punishing Nico Ladero. It's not about sending him a message. It's just like trying something different and acknowledging that if this guy is not part of the future plans, then maybe we need to like alter his role where he's more coming off the bench more often. I mean, like this week he started twice on short rest, and he missed the Charlotte game. I know there's been some folks that have pointed out that, oh, isn't it interesting that the one game he sat out, the Sounders scored 3 goals, and I don't want to
Christian Roldan played in that game,
right? So. Exactly. There was a lot of like Christian Roldan, Jordan Morrison, or Morris came off the bench, but Rui Diaz and Roldan also both started that game. That was the last game they both played. Or no, I guess that's not true. He whatever. Like they last time they played together. Point being, like there was other variables going on there other than Nico Ladero, but it just I'm at the point now where I don't think he's going to give the Sounders what they need at right mid. You can see the heat maps, especially. He just is going to float into the middle. I don't think that's entirely against the coach's directions, but you will see him absolutely float all the way out to the left wing. I mean, just using the example I just talked about, the second minute chance that he had, well, he was coming in from the left side. Like, what's he doing over there?
And if I am remembering the same chance correctly, like Orlando basically had like 50 yards of the field on their left side to just kind of like take the ball up, and I think they may have won a corner or something off of that.
I think that might be right.
And my like largest frustration with just this sort of idea of playing them as kind of like Rusnak and him as like these sort of dual 10s is the press has been the worst it's been in almost 3 or 4 years since I've been paying attention to this stuff.
Their press started out so well this year, and it has not been nearly it's been a non-factor.
And I will say, like, he is the press.
I know.
Like, him playing in that central area works so well when everything's working super well, but since they've had to be chasing these things, he is often being aggressive in situations that he doesn't need to be aggressive in. Like, I thought he was just really bad against LAFC, and I just don't get, if you can't play Rusnak and him together, don't tell one of them, like, look, we're in a situation where we have to have somebody on the right wing, and to hold.
That's going to stretch the field. That's going to do things that you are just not doing. Not to your like. And I know it's really easy, oftentimes, to focus on the team's best player when things aren't going well, because it's just like But I do think that it's not Nico's fault, but I just think that it's not lack of talent that's holding the Sounders back right now. It's that there's not a cohesive sum of parts.
Yeah, and it just like it doesn't seem. It just kind of seems like everybody feels sorry for themselves that they got into this position when there were things to build upon when the Sounders were playing really well and they had everybody to choose from. Like I think the best that the Sounders have played all season was the second half against St. Louis. And their best player in that second half was Josh Atencio.
Yeah.
And he basically, like, I just went through and looked at his minutes. He started against San Jose and he was like fine. But he
got hurt after that too.
Yeah. But it's like and maybe it just is like that simple. Like, these players have just gotten hurt at bad times, but that's also just not really that acceptable of an answer. Like, I also understand
an unsatisfying answer at the very least.
Yeah. Especially because, like, they haven't completely tanked.
Right. And that is, I know at one point you and I were talking about how, they need to, like, they are doing the bare minimum, which is grinding out results. And they are sort of like keeping their head above water. And they put themselves in a position, I suppose, to their credit, where if they can get hot, they can totally win the Western Conference still. and it's not even like they don't even have to get that hot. Like they just if they were to play at a 2 points per game pace over the last 14 how many games are they at 21 or 20 games?
There are 13 games left.
Right. Okay. So
including Saturday.
If they were to get 26 points over the last 13 games, they're going to end up on 55 points, which is probably enough to win the West.
Probably. Or at least finish second.
Yeah, like, I mean, for sure, it would be in the top three. I would, at the very least, it will be in the top three, which is where they are now. And I don't like. And the West is just it would be such a, I don't know. This would be so frustrating for them to not finish well. It's like I definitely think this team. I think this team is going to make the playoffs. Famous last words.
I would be like really surprised if they didn't.
Right. I mean, they would have to really, really tank to not make the playoffs. But that's not what any of us are looking for. We're not looking to just get into the playoffs. Like the Sounders this is a team that's talented enough to make noise in the playoffs. They should absolutely feel like advancing out of the first round of the playoffs is like the bare minimum expectation. And there's nothing about this team that like I still think that they have talent here. Like I am also frustrated that Hebert is not finishing chances, but this idea that he's like a bad player like defies what I've been seeing. You can sort of go down the line.
It just kind of like it is moving the goalposts to have this conversation about Hebert. Like this entire sort of like, oh, he's not finishing his chances, he's the worst striker in the league, type of things that pop up in the comments on Saturday or on Twitter. That like that's just not that is like so ridiculous to me because of the role he's supposed to have in this team. He's like effectively supposed to be a like for like replacement for Raul Ruidiaz, who has had questionable availability over the last year. And when he plays, when all the other best players play, he's really, really good. We saw that earlier this season.
Yeah, he's a fine complementary player. We can get into the debate of is he worth what the Sounders are paying him. I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah. But like that's what you pay backup strikers in this league.
We're having a conversation about like MLS salaries, which is just like really murky at best.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, to say it's like entirely his fault, or like to place, I would even say like a sizable amount of blame on his shoulders is just completely ridiculous. Because when you look around, like pretty much, like we just talked for a long time about how Nico Lodeiro isn't at a standard that's even worth starting in this team, and then you just kind of start going down the chain, and it's like that has meant like João Paulo's dropped off a little bit. I would say Albert Rusnak's playing really well, but
he's doing things really well. I don't know that he's doing everything you need from a 10 really well, but he's doing a lot of things well. Enough that I'm willing to keep playing him as a 10 just to see like what's there.
What's like my like biggest question, or just sort of like where my head's at, is the Sounders have played this like kind of bog standard 4-2-3-1 for a long time. In 2021, we saw like a back three with wing backs and stuff, and that worked out really well. And now we're seeing this sort of like hybrid, like built like three box whatever build out, and it's like, okay, what's like the plan beyond this immediate group of players to get the best out of? Because like, are we just going to say at the end of this season or at the end of his contract next season that like Albert Rusnak's not going to be on the Sounders? Because like you have the pieces to play like a really aggressive 4-3-3 that can still kind of build out a possession with this like Nuhu tucking in thing. And we just don't see it at all. Like at all. We're just like, okay, we have this number 10 position that we have to play. And it's like, if Albert Rusnak could be in this position, but like 15 yards further back, and then actually have like a right midfielder or a right winger that does those types of things, whether it's Dylan Tevez or whoever, it's like that actually ends up looking really good, because then you have this midfield overload and you have this control of the match. Either you play Obed Vargas to the right of JP, or you play Joss Atencio or something there. And it's like, that actually sounds like it would work to me. But like, does the team think that is an option? Like, I don't know what's the next thing, and it, not even like into future seasons, but like, if the one thing isn't working, and it's not because the Sounders can't score goals, what's the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, those are all fair questions. I suppose the one thing that does give some hope is, and I guess this is sort of what the Sounders are relying on, is that these are all fair questions. These are all legitimate things. But like, if you bring Christian, Jordan, and Alex back into this team, all of a sudden you can do a lot of the things that you're talking about more effectively. And in fact, there was sort of like what they were promising to do earlier in the season, when they were absolutely flying. They were pressing, they were connecting passes, they were, running these interesting attacking patterns and doing all this type of stuff. And hopefully they can get back to that. It's really, really disconcerting to see how much more boring they are right now, where they are generating some chances, but like, you do at some point you got to convert those, and it is way too convenient to just say like, well, the Sounders, according to expected points, they should be in first place. Well, they aren't, and that doesn't really get us much. And I think it suggests that they're doing something right, but they're not doing enough right. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that they've got to start figuring out how to get results. I don't have a lot of hope for massive changes, but like I said, the way the season's structured is, they're going to come out of the League's Cup with potentially 3 national team caliber players that they didn't have heading into the League's Cup. So, I suppose that's something to hang your hat on in hopes. But that's probably a good place for us to call this a segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Sounders that are missing at Gold Cup. We're going to talk about the Club World Cup coming to the United States, and a few other things. You're listening to Nos Arietes. Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So there's a lot going on off the field or in other aspects of the team right now. The big piece of news that came out today was Javier Arriaga is going to be out apparently 8 to 10 weeks. We had heard that he was hurt in training with Ecuador's national team. There was hope that it was maybe like a 3 or 4 week kind of thing, and maybe it wouldn't even be that big of a deal. But now it looks like he's going to be out until maybe September, which, if you're wondering, the transfer window closes in August 5th, I think is what we figured out.
Yeah.
So either way, he's not going to be fit to before the end of the transfer window. And the reason that's relevant is I think the Sounders sort of like hope of making a move this summer was mostly predicated on finding a trade partner that would, at one point the Sounders felt like they could get like a pretty nice haul in allocation money, as well as moving him off the books, potentially netting them somewhere in the $1.5 million salary cap maneuverability range. I don't know that they ever actually had an offer that was going to net them that kind of money, but they're not going to be able to trade him, I guess is my point. I don't think anyone's going to acquire a player who is in the middle of a recovery. I don't even know I assume you're allowed to do it, but I'm not holding out any hope for that. And he's going to be out so long that I think the Sounders at least have to explore the possibility. And by the way, he's not out of contract at the end of this year, but the Sounders do have a club option. It's very hard to imagine them picking up that club option at this point. And I mean, he's on what, $750,000 or something like that in salary. It pains me to say this because it just feels like a waste of resources, but I almost think the Sounders have to explore the possibility of buying him out and then turning around and taking that cap space and, investing it in a right midfielder or something. Like it doesn't give them a ton of flexibility. I mean, one of the problems is that it only gives them the prorated portion of his salary. They don't get, there's no allocation windfall or anything like that. But if they want to make any move, that's almost the only one that I can, unless they have like a big transfer lined up for one of their young guys, which I have not heard any rumors of.
I also haven't, but I'm not as plugged in to that kind of thing as you are, because you go to training and stuff and I don't. But I mean, I think this just kind of sets up for like a real classic Sounders maneuver where maybe the most famous example actually didn't end up working out really well, and it was Adam Moffat. But they just like get somebody from within the league, like
like an last year of their contract type of player.
Yeah, like it was Luis Silva in 2019. It was there was just like they just went and got bodies, and which is kind of funny because Arriaga was that, because he was signed like directly after Chad Marshall had his surprise retirement, if I'm not mistaken, right, in 2019. That window.
They picked up Arriaga mid-season that year in a transfer.
Yeah,
but
I think anyways. It like Garth Lagerwey always used to say like, oh, we like brought this money forward to like fill a need now, or
right.
like we did that type of thing,
right? Yeah.
And it's like, did we just like do that too many times and don't have that to do anymore, or what? But like,
right.
I would almost be like kind of disappointed if they didn't at least try to do something there. But they also kind of have this MO where it's like they try to sort of be the nice guys with all this stuff. So it's like, do they really want to set the precedent where they just kind of cut ties with the guy right now? I would say it's probably better for him from a playing perspective because of the way that the world transfer market works in the summer.
Yeah.
So there's like that, but all of a sudden, like you kind of came into the season with Craig Weibel not having to do a whole lot, and now he really does kind of need to do something, if only to kind of set like a tone, like the Sounders have always classically done in situations like this.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that it does feel like they almost have to do something. And like I said, it's not that they don't have any reinforcements coming this summer. I do think like my sort of joking aside, it's not irrelevant that they have, Alex Roldan, Christian Roldan, and Jordan Morris all potentially coming back into this team. Those are important players. Those are good players. If they, went out into the open market and acquired 3 comparable players, we would be over the moon in terms of like what that can potentially mean. But yeah, they don't have a lot of flexibility. They don't have the ability to go out and make a bunch of moves, and they are sort of at the whim of finding this. They sort of tried to do this last year too, where they didn't have a lot of salary cap maneuverability, and they were basically trying to get, if I remember correctly, San Jose was the one that was real high on their list to basically give them like Judson or who was they had like 3
Grey Goose.
Yeah, Jan Grey Goose. They had a few guys that they were sort of like trying to talk San Jose into effectively giving them, and San Jose ended up not giving them and lost all 3 and ended up letting all 3 of them walk anyway. but like that's the sort of the kind of thing that they're looking to do. But man, I'll tell you, I'm looking through the list of potentially expiring contracts at the end of this year, and there are not a lot of, as you might expect, it's either players that are very clearly going to have their options picked up by their teams, or it's guys like João Paulo or Julian Gressel or something like that. And it's like you gotta like there's not a lot of talent that's just waiting to be picked up, but that's sort of what you would expect. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the thing that would be sort of encouraging about their willingness to buy out Arriaga is almost more that it shows a what's the right term? A ambition to be proactive about improving their roster. And I think that's what's maybe I think that's what a lot of people are sort of frustrated about.
Yeah. And it also like, it allows Craig Weibel to be like, no, this is actually my team. And I'm not just filling in some rather large shoes that just left.
Right.
Like I'm not just like an empty suit type of guy.
Right.
Which would, I think, be a pretty harsh characterization. But if like nothing happened and they were just like, oh yeah, his contract is actually expiring at the end of the year. Huh. That is interesting. That type of thing would really suck. So it's like, you and like, I don't know the ins and outs of Inter Miami's roster, but they're about to do some like pretty crazy things in this transfer window.
It seems that way. Yeah.
I don't accept that the Sounders can't be sitting at that table trying to be like the beneficiary of some of that, especially since Chris Henderson is their GM. So it's like, it's like,
you would think that they have his phone number is what you're saying.
Yeah. Or just being like, hey, look, like,
well, here, I'll give you one name of a player who just sort of like going through this list that actually, there's this guy, Robert Taylor, that happens to be on Miami, who is not like, nothing about him jumps off the page as being a star or anything like that. But this is the kind of guy who, he has a history of scoring some goals in Europe, albeit in, I guess this is
Finland.
I think Norway is where he was playing. But he also has got 5 career MLS goals in 2 seasons, and he could be a useful player, and he's probably someone that I would imagine Miami is dying to get rid of and probably happy to get rid of for nothing.
Yeah.
And like even give me something like this. Give me a guy like that. I'm not asking for much.
Yeah.
He was playing for Norway before. Or in Norway, I should say.
I'm just trying to do a really quick Google here to make sure he's not like one of the 7 players that they have that just tore their ACL. But like there's gotta be like something, or like so for instance, Dominic Baji plays for FC Cincinnati, who are going to be doing some musical chairs in their forward position. And it's like, if Baji doesn't have like a clear path there, he could come play here for a few months. Like just something like that. I think probably needs to happen to like, just if purely just for vibes, you know?
Well, exactly. I think that is, and not to downplay that, but I do think there's something to be said about bringing in a new face and just someone that's gonna, create another point of competition. And sure, like I do want to see the Sounders give some more minutes to the guys they have, the young guys they have here. Dylan Tevez, I don't think is completely useless as a prospect. But, I think this is sort of, maybe we can call it the Sam Adeniran problem, where, here was a player who showed some promise, who didn't quite fit the role the Sounders had in mind for him. And like, he scored 2 goals this last week, and that's the first 2 MLS goals he's ever scored. So I don't want to overstate how great he is, but that they were willing to sort of give him away for almost nothing it sort of speaks to sometimes how they are a little reluctant to give new faces minutes. And I just think that maybe this is a good time for us to shake things up a little, and maybe not go with the same, like, thank you for all your service, Nico, and thank you for everything that you've done for this club. But like, we just need you to take a little bit of a break,
Yeah. And I mean, in 2019, in that kind of summer window, they brought in Emmanuel Shashini, if that's how I remember saying his name correctly.
Yeah, he was a disaster though.
Yeah, and Luis Silva from DC United.
Right.
So like, they did something.
Right. No, absolutely. And I guess that's the thing is like that I think your point is more that they have been a team that's been willing to just bring guys in to sort of maximize they have these mechanisms that they want to use, and they are willing to use it. And yes, let's see more of that. Let's see some of that ambition. The reality is that they have not made almost any moves to bring players in from outside the organization in almost 2 years. And, they signed Albert Rusnak on a free. They brought Aber in a trade. And that's like really the extent of moves they've made the last 4 transfer windows, I think. So yeah, like let's or moves from outside the organization. Let's see something. I suppose you could throw 2 more names I'll throw out there. I suppose you could sign Paul Rothrock or Bradilia Rodriguez, who are 2 players that are doing quite well for Tacoma Defiance, and maybe they deserve a shout. I won't pretend as if that's not going to be, a little, what's the right word? It won't underwhelming. It's like both those players I think are interesting players, but I don't think anyone's going to get excited about them, even though Rothrock has a goal in his or he has 3 goals actually in his 3 Sounders appearances. So I don't know, maybe that's a good time to bring him in, and maybe he'll be signed anyway. And who knows, maybe he's even the answer. But it feels a little convenient to say that. Like that would be the easy answer, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like too bad that Lamar Nagel and Eric Freiberg are just too old at this point.
Yeah, just bring them back. Exactly.
Or Flacco.
Right. Yeah.
This was the time they would always just re-sign those guys.
That is true. That is absolutely true. All right. Well, so moving on to other things. Right now, the Sounders have 2 or 3 players actually in the Gold Cup, as you may or may not know. Jordan started for the U.S. and by all accounts seemed to be pretty bad for the U.S. in their 1-1 tie with Jamaica. Christian Roldan came off the bench in that one. I think he played about 20 minutes, and he was actually pretty good. I did not watch this game. It was going on almost exactly at the same time as the Sounders game, and it's almost impossible to find these games on replay. But everything I've read about Roldan was that he was actually pretty good in the game. He was a little unlucky not to get a score or not to get a goal. And then Alex Roldan started at left back, where he apparently is starting all the time now for El Salvador. And they lost 2-1 to Martinique. Maybe he might be coming home early.
Or is it like a wing back position?
I think it's left back in a back 4. Although maybe I haven't watched them closely enough to be able to say if it's like a Nuhu left back or if it's a, like where he's being asked to attack and do all those kinds of things. But I suppose the good news is if El Salvador goes out in the group stage, we'll get him back a little earlier than we otherwise would.
Yeah, which is a kind of a catch-22 because he's the player we probably missed the least.
Yeah, maybe because,
that could be.
Baker's been pretty good.
I'm not sure I understand.
I just don't think right back as like the position that changes the world or anything.
I would agree with you. Yeah,
the Sounders play right now. Although if the idea is to play him a little further forward, I could be into that. But I don't know. I basically just kind of think like we won't see any of these guys until Leagues Cup.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like, it sort of does sound like that's the kind of the bet that the Sounders have made with this kind of chunk of games.
It does.
Which is, I don't know. I find that a little frustrating that they've just kind of like accepted the lots. But I'm just a guy, and they have to do this professionally. So
right. Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I think what your point is that they could have seen this coming, and it's not like the Gold Cup caught them by surprise. And we can complain all we want about whether or not the United States should have called up Christian and Jordan, but like that was always a very predictable outcome.
Yeah, and it's just like what it puts the player. I think it puts the players in like a really uncomfortable position because it's like, what are they gonna do? They're gonna say no?
No, of course they're gonna. And it's like, and I know we got into this sort of debate in the Sounder at Heart comments where someone was suggesting that if they think they have a chance of getting into the World Cup, they're crazy. And it's like, they're professional athletes, of course. Like, and I guarantee everyone was saying the same thing a year ago. Oh, Jordan and Christian will never get into the World Cup. And no, they didn't play a lot. And yes, there is a more than fair debate to be had about whether or not they should have been on that team. But the reality was they were on the team. Like, that's an undeniable fact.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they are going to continue to try to make future gold or World Cups, especially when it's going to be in the United States, in case you hadn't heard. And there's a Copa America, and there's all kinds of things that they're going to want to play in, understandably. So, like, no, they're not going to turn down call-ups. That's just not how it works.
And there's just a complete dynamic that no fan talks about, where it's like they like to represent their country,
right?
And that
it's
matters
just fun.
A lot to them,
right?
And they just they have friends on that team,
right?
And it's and like by all sort of like reports and accounts and stuff, they're like really great like locker room presences, and
right, everyone likes them,
and which obviously makes sense because they're outstanding individuals, Christian and Jordan. I'm sure Alex is too, but we're talking in the kind of the context of the US team. So it's just like, it's such a frustrating conversation to have, because it's like, why are we in 2023 with all these sort of advancements that Major League Soccer have made, and a team like the Seattle Sounders, who have doubled and tripled down on domestic talent with these two players,
right,
2 and 3 times over with contract extensions, why are they getting the short end of the stick?
Right. I mean, if anything, be mad at MLS for scheduling the Leagues Cup independent. Like, if you had played the Gold Cup and the Leagues Cup at the same time, I don't know. Like, sure, that would rob you of some talent, but not that much, frankly.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's just so, it's where I kind of sympathize with like the real haters of this league, because it's just like so dumb that it's come to this. It's like, why it is better to have like the Brazilian equivalent of Jordan Morris on the Sounders from a Sounders perspective than it is to have Mercer Island Jordan Morris on the Sounders.
Yeah.
Because that quality of player, he's just as good as Jordan Morris, but he's never going to get into his national team.
Right.
And it's like, why are we incentivizing that type of behavior when this, like, Jordan Morris should be kind of one of like the crowning achievements from a domestic talent standpoint in this league because of everything he's been through, and it's screwing over his club team.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of frustration. I guess your point is, I think that there's a lot of frustration. None of it should be aimed at the players,
especially because the crazy people that support this national team like to blame them for everything.
Right. Exactly. So the final bit that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the Club World Cup is coming to the United States in 2025. I'm pretty excited about this, even though the Club World Cup is going to be probably just a I don't know that it's that different in practice or in how seriously teams will take it than from these preseason European kind of fake tournaments that they bring to the United States, the Champions Cup or whatever they call these things. But I do think it's going to be pretty fun. It's going to be expanded to 32 teams. They're going to play a group stage, like a proper group stage. So there's going to be like 60 games being played in this Club World Cup, which is just wild to think about. The Sounders have already qualified for it, as have Chelsea, Real Madrid, and Liverpool, right?
No, Manchester City.
Oh, Manchester City. That's right.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, there's going to be some of the world's biggest teams playing in this thing. And the thing that's really interesting is, like, I got to imagine they're going to want to host this at the same places they're going to host the World Cup a year later, right? I mean,
that's how it kind of used to be. Like, I don't know how many iterations of the Club World Cup ago, but so for instance, like the 19 Club World Cup, the one that Liverpool happened to win.
You're saying the one that was in Qatar?
Yeah, they were at the Qatar facilities. And a long time ago, when was it Japan and South Korea hosted?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't even thought about that. That's interesting.
I only know this from the context of like the ones that Liverpool have participated in, because
I think you're right. I think those two were did sort of end up that way.
So it was like sort of a test run in addition to like they used to do like the Confederations Cup or whatever.
Right. The Confederations Cup was traditionally the summer before the World Cup, and they've gotten rid of the Confederations Cup.
Yeah, but like for as long as I've been following European soccer, which has been a long time at this point, they've always kind of talked about this like expanded Club World Cup. So
yeah,
on one hand, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's cool that they're finally doing it. Excuse me, but at the other hand, it's like, how are these players going to live? Like,
I mean, it's potentially
like 80 or 90. It's like 80 or 90 games between. Like, if you look at like, so for instance, let's say like Harry Kane, is the captain of his club team, the captain of his national team, and let's say, for instance, he's playing for a team that is successful in the Champions League, which I know it currently isn't. And it's like you're looking at like a 90-game calendar for a player like that, and it's just like
it does seem a little ridiculous.
So on one hand, I think it's like really cool. I'm like excited from a Sounders perspective, but I'm just wondering overall what's the kind of like quality, because I see the other side of the conversation where fans of European clubs are just sort of like, why even bother with this? So
yeah, I mean, I will say that from Sounders perspective, my hope is that this tournament is played concurrently with the Leagues Cup, and whoever, if any MLS or Liga MX, whichever MLS and Liga MX teams are involved, just get excused from Leagues Cup. My suspicion is that won't happen because MLS doesn't seem to think of things in a way like that. Like they're going to want to maximize promotion, and so they aren't going to want to go head to head with the Club World Cup. But that would be a really neat way of organizing this, because otherwise the summer of 2025 is going to be an absolute nightmare. Maybe they'll call off the Leagues Cup. That would honestly be like, Leagues Cup probably should take a break for 2025, maybe even for 2026 when they're playing the World Cup in the United States and Mexico. But that summer, it's like scary to think of like how crazy they could make that summer if the league sort of like barges forward with this thing.
When Liverpool went to the Club World Cup, just to kind of put some like
numbers,
put some like worrying minds at rest, that it's just not like Major League Soccer that kicks
Right.
themselves in the
Yeah.
hearts or whatever. Liverpool had to play Aston Villa on December 17th in a EFL Cup game, which is kind of their secondary domestic trophy. So
Right.
it's not the FA Cup, but it's the other one. The next day, they were scheduled to play in the Club World Cup. So they had to play their U23s against Aston Villa and basically forfeit a competition to the point where Jurgen Klopp wasn't even there because there were two games on two different continents, 18 hours apart. I don't think Major League Soccer's going to be any smarter than that. So I think we might just see situations where it's like you got to play the Defiance in Leagues Cup, and that's that. But I don't know. I think there's too many games.
Yeah, that is definitely that's absolutely one of the downsides of this. I will say the one other thing that I like about this Club World Cup is I've adopted this pet campaign, I guess I'll call it, that it's just another reason that I think Lumen Field needs to put in grass sooner than later, because can you imagine if they have grass there? I would assume that they are almost a shoo-in to be one of the host cities for the Club World Cup. They probably would be a shoo-in for hosting the Copa America, which is coming in 2024. They are already having to put in the grass in 2026 for the Men's World Cup. And then the U.S. is going to be bidding for the 27 Women's World Cup. And you would have to think Seattle would be in the running for that as well. And so my point is that if you're already going to have to put it in the grass in 2026, and by the way, it's going to either force you to play some home games at a secondary facility, or you're going to have to take an outrageously long road trip to start the season. Why not just do it now? I don't know that there is I'm not quite sure I understand the argument for waiting at this point other than a lack of planning.
Yeah, they might not get an opportunity where Lumen Field isn't being used for anything.
Right, exactly.
Longer than the one that happens this offseason. Even if I don't necessarily follow the ins and outs of the Seahawks, or from what I'm gathering, they're not supposed to be that good.
But even if they were to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so let's say even if they hosted the NFC Championship game,
right,
to the what we're guessing would be the start of MLS season, they have about 6 weeks. And that's it. That's the biggest chunk of time that they will have in years.
Right. Yeah. So. And there's no and the Sounders would obviously still have to go on a road trip probably to make that work, but that would be probably half as long as the road trip they would have to go on if they wait until 2026 to install the grass. I actually wrote a whole column that articulated a whole series of reasons to do this. I won't get into all of them here, but I'll just say that I very much talked myself into thinking this is almost a no-brainer idea at this point. And the not the least of which is that you also have a lot more time to figure out how to make the grass work.
Yeah, because the grass might suck.
Right, exactly. It might. That's a real thing that might require some adjustments, and it would be a lot easier to make those adjustments over the next 2 summers and winters or the next 2 years than to do it all in the run up to the World Cup and then trying to figure out how to maintain it for the rest of the year. Anyway, well, that's all we got. We are maybe going to have a mailbag show later in the week. But Mark, thank you so much for filling in for Aaron today.
My pleasure.
We're going to actually, our plan is to sort of change up the lineup a little bit more regularly in the coming months and I suppose beyond. But yeah, I know I'm going to be taking a week off in August, and Aaron will probably take weeks off periodically as well. And Mark, we really appreciate you filling in whenever possible. I'm asking you to commit to anything at this point, but you were a great co-host today, so thank you.
Yeah, I've just been putting my work in and training, waiting for the coach to call me up. So
yeah, well, I'm finally glad we did that. But thank you to our sponsors, Watson's Counter and Full Pull Wines, as well as our Substack subscribers. In case you didn't know, you can find us at nosadietes.substack.com, and plans are available for as cheap as $5 a month or $50 a year. All that said, I am Jeremiah Shan, and this is Nos Adietes. Remember, you will never yacht alone.
We love you. Let's win another one!